Welcome to Coffee with a Purpose, everyone. Our last session for March, and we're kind of splitting it between election and just learning about offices. We've covered all of the contested races, but we're happy to have with us this morning Carla Sangri, who's running, and I apologize if I didn't pronounce your last name correctly. Um, for a seat on the Board of Health. She sits on the Board of Health, is running for an extra second term or possibly third, whatever you can educate us. So we're interested to meet you and to hear what it is the Board of Health does, because I'm sure they do lots of super important things that we would love to hear about. And then also we've got Eric Henderson from the Assessors office here, who is not running for election, but is here to educate us about the Assessors office. And they're ambivalent about who goes first, but I think we're going to start with Carla. I think we'll follow our usual custom, though, just so you have some sense of who's in the audience. We'll just go around real quickly and introduce ourselves. I'm Doug. I moderate this group, longtime volunteer at the Congregational Church, the one we were just talking about with the spring flowers, the daffodils. And I don't know much about either the Board of Health or the Assessor's Office. So I'm anxious to learn. Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah, retired geologist, spent my career doing hazardous site assessment. Now in retirement, do a bunch of volunteer work around town. I'm a town meeting member on the um, why can't I think of the name of it? Community Preservation Committee. It's Monday and I haven't had enough coffee, uh, as well as various other things. So
Thanks. Kathleen?
Hi, good morning, Carla and Eric. Look forward to learning about your work. Important, but kind of behind the scenes for many of us. I am a 35-year resident of Natick. I am on the Library Board of Trustees, and I also volunteer with Pat's Keep Natick Beautiful.
Great. Thanks. Bill?
Hi, Bill Ramage. I am active at First Congregational Church. I also am serving with Sarah on the Community Preservation Committee and interested in all things Natick. So welcome.
He's also a Pat Conaway volunteer, too. As are a lot of
Aren't
scribes.
we all?
Yeah. Cindy?
I just came back from Coolidge Field picking up trash.
yay.
Coming up on 6-year resident of Natick, I sing in sound and spirit, and I am a trail steward for the Tacawambe Trail. So, as part of that, I did some research into the history of the land, and then I found some errors in the GIS. So I've been working with that, and I think tangentially with you, Eric. So, happy to see you in person.
That's cool. Great. Sally?
Oh, good morning. I'm unmuted and I didn't realize. I'm Sally Hopkins. I've lived here now about 9 years. I'm a avid follower of our Coffee with a Purpose. Doug and Sarah do a beautiful job, and Martin Kessel. It just keeps us, starts our week with a lot of good things to know about Natick. And I'm also a devotee of Keep Natick Beautiful.
Thanks, Sally. And the man himself, Pat.
Yes, good morning. Pat Conaway, keep Nate beautiful.
Great. Thanks. Roger, good to see you.
Yeah, hi. Great to be here. Roger Luckman, been in Natick about 30 years, retired a few years ago from UMass Medical School, where I was in the Department of Family and Community Medicine and did preventive medicine, primary care, taught biostatistics and epidemiology, and really interested these days in climate change, and I'm an active member of Echo Natick.
Thank you. Tom.
Hi, I'm Tom. 35 years uh, in Natick, and welcome. Glad to see you.
Thanks, Tom. Let's see, Brinley.
Wow.
Good morning. Brinley Vickers. I've been here about 26 years. Two kids in the system. I'll turn my camera on for the introduction and say hi. Um, have two kids in the system, one all the way through into college and one still at the high school. Um, um, I'm just nosy body around town, likes to get in good trouble. Was on the recycling committee when we had one, was on the as you throw task force when you have one, town meeting member, also Econadic. I'm grateful you guys are here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Brinley. Catherine.
Hi, a bit under the weather, not coming on camera, just saying hi. 20-year resident, Select Board, Affordable Housing Trust, and a big advocate of the tax deferral program, Eric. So speak on that. And thanks.
Thanks, Catherine. And Donna.
Hi, good to be here. I'm not a morning person, so this is an indication of how much I really enjoy this group. Welcome, everybody. And I'm a bioethicist, a Catholic chaplain, and I'm involved in many things in Natick. And I'm actually running for school committee. So remember me at the ballot. Anyway, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. And I think that's everybody for now. We'll probably have some others filter in and out. So again, Carla and Eric, thank you both for joining us. We'll turn the floor over to you. Carla, I was saying to Eric as well, if you have anything that you want to share on the screen, that function is available to you as well. So.
Okay, yeah. So do you want me, I can introduce myself a little bit to
Yes.
you guys, right?
Yeah.
So I am Carla Sangre. You pretty much got my name right. And I was just counting in my head. My husband and I bought our first house in Natick in 2004. He lived in Natick before that, since I think about 97. And we have moved once across town. So we're 20 plus a year residents of Natick. We have one son who's still in the public schools. Um, I am by training a civil environmental engineer. I'm a PE, and I work and have worked for over 20 years at Upper Blackstone Clean Water, which is a clean water utility that serves Worcester and its surrounding communities. And I'm currently the director out there. This will be my third round running for the Board of Health. I first ran in 2020. I know one of the members of the Board of Health. Actually, I know them both, and I knew them both before I ran for office. One of them was my dentist, and Dr. Della Polly. And Dr. and Don Brita is a colleague I knew because we worked at the same company before he retired and I went on to another job somewhere else. So I knew them both around town people as well as and in fact I started attending Board of Health meetings about a year before I ran to try to figure out if I wanted to and what was going on there. You know, what I bring from the environmental side is particularly helpful with things like septic systems, on-site waste disposal, watershed protection. Um, and the health department is are the full-time staff and the hardworking people who actually do the work of the health department, right? And the board is their independent governance and independent from the select board, which is noteworthy, I think, because it allows for decisions that affect public health to be made independent of other decisions. It's not the easiest thing to find volunteers, I think, that are willing to be on these different boards and committees. And I'm running uncontested for this position. I would actually welcome the running contested. I think there should be more people that if we can get more people interested to do this, the Board of Health should in the future be looking to have a physician on the board, right? That's a logical, nice mix of people to represent the public health concerns. So Did I say I was the first woman on the Board of Health
You did not, but
in
that's
Natick
great.
ever? I think I got a letter after I got elected the first time, which was pretty cool. I put that one on my refrigerator. So that was yeah, that was touching. And I actually decided to run then a while before that first before the 2020 actually election came up. And so I got elected to the Board of Health right before COVID. So I had been on the board like a month
So it was your fault, huh?
when
That
the
COVID
pandemic
happened.
started. And so that was a particularly challenging time, right? To balance between what was going on with the school committee and decisions that everybody was trying to make and what was coming down from sort of health recommendations across the country and across the state. And a lot of folks wanted someone to blame for whether you were putting a restriction on or you weren't putting a restriction on. So that was a very, very challenging time, a lot different than, you know, permits for chickens in your backyard and whether or not a septic system meets criteria that are the bread and butter regular things that the health department's doing. But they also do tobacco regulations and have worked close with kids on like Natick Above the Influence, which is a kids group, particularly in the high school. Those kids come in to see the board through their connections with Natty or Natick 180. And you see young adults trying to get more involved in public policy issues and advocate for positions. And at times, Natick has been a leader in adopting positions and, like the plastic bag ban in the stores came out of the health department before I was on the board. Was it before? I think it was before I was on the board. Um, so obviously there's some of those topics can be controversial. Generally, I mean, the Board of Health isn't incredibly controversial, although we've had a lot of challenges with vaccine policy. For the public nurse in town, it's been very challenging to figure out whether or not they have the funding to provide vaccines that they do. I mean, you guys might know, but if you are unable to get yourself somewhere to get a vaccine or you can't afford a vaccine, it's very often available to you free of charge through the health department in town. The public health nurse also works with families that are coming in with students going into the school system to make sure that they have all their vaccinations. So vaccines and vaccine stress about what's in and what's out and what are the recommendations has been weighing heavily on that department. Luckily, the state has been stepped up in that area and sort of covered us where the feds have not. So that I think people that live in Massachusetts are lucky in that regard.
Hmm.
So that was a lot I just dumped out there. And I've only had like this much of my tea, so
Well,
It's okay, you're a tea drinker. That's winning.
I am a tea drinker. Yep, for years.
So Donna is modeling. What I was just going to say was we'll use our typical raise hands feature to ask questions or just engage in some more dialogue. Donna, what would you like to say or ask?
I have a question, but before I ask my question, I just want to say the Board of Health is wonderful. First of all, my father was confined to a wheelchair in his last days, and your nurse came to my house several times and gave him flu vaccines and other shots that he needed. And you brought joy to him in the way in which she interacted with him. So that is a very, very good service. We also I have a family member who was adopted from the Philippines and was in need of vaccinations to go to school. And the Board of Health to the rescue. They said, come on down with this child and we will happily vaccinate him so that he can get in school. So I really applaud you and like really thank you for your work. You also you mentioned the plastic straws and also the plastic bags, and I was in town meeting during those discussions, which seemed complicated and not going so much. But the Board of Health kind of swooped in and took them up and came out with a decision on that and took the lead on that, which raises a question for me. Do you see what kind of instances do you see where being proactive on issues that are health issues would be really helpful? Are there any other issues that you think the Board of Health, might take a more proactive stand on, such as the plastic bags and the straws? And another question, will you reevaluate the straws at some point? Because now they're saying that paper straws have more PFAS in them than plastic does. I know this is so complicated. It's like, get ready for like the health data to change all the time. But you're doing a great job. I don't have any big complaints, but thank you for being here. And that's my question.
Sure. And it's really the staff that is doing a great job, right? And you can't emphasize that too much. Mr. Boudreau is in charge of the health department now, after Jimmy White retired. And he is a good leader for his folks and a good communicator with the board. And the board's providing guidance and making suggestions. And I think you're right too, nudging in different directions at times, or sometimes pushing back. Right now, there's a lot of interest in an initiative on smoking cessation, right? To gradually increase the age that you can buy tobacco. It's tobacco-free generation. Has anybody heard of that, right? Initiative? Yep. And that is sort of spreading slowly across the Commonwealth. And
Brookline does it, right?
What's that?
Brookline.
Brookline, yeah, very likely. Right. Whenever we discuss this at our meetings, we talk about which towns have adopted first. Not that you're waiting to not be the first one, but to kind of see how it's going. And I think a really interesting thing about that is, I mean, obviously people's personal rights and freedoms to do what they want are very, very important, right? But on a topic like this, it's interesting that the way that it's proposed is it's like grandfathered, right? So it's only picking up your younger folks as they grow up. And if it's those kids who are coming to you and saying, we want this out of our lives. It's compelling, and that's a topic right now that I'm not sure where it's going to go. But you talked about the straws, and I agree with you that it might make sense to revisit those things. And since you mentioned that word, that acronym PFAS, I'll touch on it a little bit. So as I said, I'm a water engineer, and so I do get to deal with PFAS in my professional life as well, and have a background. I'm not a toxicologist, but I think the management of risks around PFAS is a really important thing that I'm sure you guys understand, right? That there is exposure to these chemicals in so many parts of our lives. And hopefully all of those are going to go down as these chemicals are no longer in commercial circulation, right? That's a critical element here, right? But how do you balance exposure risks? When somebody tells you PFAS is in something, right? Does that mean you have a categorical ban of that thing altogether? Or not, right? Do you let your grandchild roll around on your carpet naked because they probably are getting exposed to PFAS there too, which is a horrible thought, right? So I take I have an understanding of that PFAS topic, and nobody, including me, wants any PFAS exposure for my family, but I know that we have it too. So I'm really strong advocate for trying to remove those compounds from things that we're buying in the store.
Thank you so much. And I love what you said about the cigarette smoking. My mom died of cigarette smoking when she was 75. And when she was dying, she's like, I'm having these dreams that you're walking around taking cigarettes out of people's mouths in Natick. And she wished so much she could have quit sooner. I think anything we can do to keep cigarettes out of the hands of a new generation is great. So thank you for your work on that, and interesting about your thoughts on PFAS. I think you said once, and I don't mean to be banal, but I think you may have said once that even things like toilet paper are full of PFAS. So should we be careful? I mean, I know people who, use bamboo or some other kind of product. I mean, is that a concern that we should have?
You can make choices for your laundry detergent or your dryer sheets or your toilet paper and all of these things to try to reduce your exposure to toxics, right? I think those are all individual decisions. I mean, I use wool balls in my dryer, right? That's my choice, right? But I also have a box of Bounce that we sometimes use too. So, I think it these are really hard decisions, right? I think we should all be supporters on Beacon Hill of things we can do to get these things out of our commercial products, because that ultimately is going to make a big difference. I mean, the water treatment standards that they have now in the state and proposed by EPA, I think get you down to areas where the toxicology is good. And that's the thing I was talking about, managing risks. Again, if somebody says there's a 1 in 1 million increased chance of something happening because of an exposure level, what does that mean, and what do you do with that?
Yeah. Let's move on to some of the other hands up. Sally, come off mute.
Thanks. And this is another tangent. I'm just interested, has the Board of Health been approving a series of new restaurants, or do we have some growth in, is that quite a large job? Or then second, sort of tangential to that, does the Board of Health have a list of criteria for like church kitchens and that sort of thing? Would you speak to that for me?
Yeah, Sally, that's and I probably should have brought that up already in the discussion of all the different things that the health department does, right? They're responsible for all those inspections on the restaurants as well as uh, um, food service that is intermittent, right? Things ranging from, like you said, pop-up kitchens. I'm not sure specifically, when you talk about the kitchen at the church, I think it depends on what kind of food you're preparing. Certainly covers the farmers market, right? And the different kinds of foods that they're allowed to do. And food service, and how long something can be at what temperatures, and that's what your staff are doing, and how many businesses and food service establishments there are in Natick, and so I think that staff is challenged to keep up with all of the inspections that they have to do. There citations happen. They have things only really come to the board level when an establishment is maybe looking for a waiver, right? Looking for variance from a standard. Otherwise, it's the staff that are doing the inspections and enforcing the current regulations. If we were going to change a regulation, like we recently have talked about a variance because some of the sushi restaurants can use a pH method for holding rice versus a temperature method, right? And it's completely fine, very established thing. But those are all things that those health department staff are doing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael would take anyone's call or email if you have a question about a specific instance or you have something that was concerning.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Carla. Bill?
Hi. Couple of things. You mentioned the plastic bag ban. I just wanted to point out, I think Pat Conaway had more to do with that as an individual than the rest of the community combined. But took him a while, but he got it done. So thank you, Pat. You were talking about citizen petitions or advocating. I want to talk a little bit about artificial turf. That's another thing that EcoNatick was involved with. We tried to get it banned. That failed miserably. And then round two, I believe it was referred. I was involved early in that, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and called the Department of Health to ask what kind of testing they were doing. And I got a very responsive, responsible young lady answered my call and told me basically that the health department at that point was just testing temperatures so that if it got warm, if it was 90 degrees out, the PFAS or not PFAS, the artificial turf was like 140 degrees and the health department would ban use typically in the summer. But I'm not up on this, but I understand there's PFAS issues and issues around runoff, and especially when the artificial turf is worn out and has to be replaced, there's a lot of toxic issues there. And I believe the health department was referred in part to the health department. Can you give us an update on where we are on the whole artificial turf thing?
Right now, there is coming out of what was coming out of fall town meeting, right? There's a committee in place, right? A study committee, and the health department was to be represented on that committee, and I'm the representative on that committee. So I have I've attended now. I wasn't even on the committee when they started meeting. So I've met at their last two meetings when they've been most recently speaking with a bunch of the different sports teams and groups about their needs and field issues in Natick in terms of having the number of fields. So I am a participant representing the health department on that committee now, which is really good, educational to listen to other people that have been doing other aspects of this for years, as you said. And again, I'm aware of like what you're talking about with temperature and bulb testing and with runoff issues from fields and with different types of infill on fields and with disposal when the essentially the carpet, let's call it, right, has to be changed out, and that's usually like a 10-year cycle, I think, often. Again, I'm a civil engineer, so I mean I have a site experience. I understand turf fields and natural grass fields. I and also understand we have a problem in town with the overuse of all the fields that we have. You know, these fields do well with put out numbers, something like 600 hours of use, and we put 1,200 hours of use on our natural fields, and then we try to have them be nice fields still, and that's really hard to do, right? So you have like everything else, you have a lot of balance between all of the health benefits of getting all of our kids out there exercising, which we all want to do, and get them off of their phones, and obviously making sure that if you are going to do anything that's not a natural turf field, that all the environmental implications of that too. So it's a challenge, and that's why it's come to be this hot a topic, right? It wouldn't be if it weren't. And I do know that there's been a lot of, like everything PFAS, there's a lot of initiatives to get those compounds out of the commercial cycle and to make choices about things like infill. So certainly you can get a better field now than you could 15 years ago. But it's still not a natural surface. Natural surfaces have their challenges too, and runoff and fertilizers and yeah, but I'm on that committee, so I'm a participant and I'm representing the health department, and I go back to the health department meetings, the Board of Health meetings, and talk about what's going on at that committee. So
It's
good to be on the table.
Yeah, just one quick follow-up.
Yeah.
Have there been studies around the health effects of kids like sliding and getting scratches and touching that plastic and the effects of that. I get the need to have field time. I get that completely. But the flip side is, are the kids safe when they play on this
Right,
material?
right. Well, uh, you know, I have certainly heard quotes of plenty of papers that have said that there's not a significant difference, and then some reports that there are differences, right? And so that's like everything else, you have to check the source, right? And on all of these, in all of these field cases, it's so important that the property is maintained, right? That the asset that the taxpayers' money has paid for getting put in there in the first place is maintained. And sort of across the board, there's kind of a need for better maintenance, you know, and people come up with ways to get the dollars for the capital investment. And how do you make sure in the community that along with the decision to invest in anything, that you're also investing in the management of the asset over time and keeping up with it? Because otherwise the folks' money is not being well spent, just like if you don't maintain your house or your yard, right? So it's a terminal problem in cities and towns, right? But and it's hard, it's not glamorous, but towns really got to make sure they have adequate investment in maintenance. I mean, you
That's a
guys
really
all see
good
that in
but
public spaces across the board, right?
that's
Yep.
a good
Thank
point.
you.
Like extends beyond health issues. Life is a balancing act, I think. I've got a kind of a much bigger focus question, I guess is, you know, you mentioned, I think the first time you ran was as the pandemic broke out. So between the pandemic, between the current federal administration, and between all of the misinformation and disinformation on growing on social media, it just strikes me that um, the charge to the health department and to the Board of Health has perhaps changed quite a bit over the last 5 or 6 years. Are you seeing, like, how do things operate today versus 5 years ago, or just, you know, what do you see as the biggest challenges to getting the work done? And is public education about health issues a growing part of that charge? Or
I think so. I think there's, you know, and I think that's a really tough one for a town to, you know, take on. They can't take on all of social media on a topic, right?
right?
But from my position on the board, I'm always encouraging more outreach and more communication to the community about the different things that the department has got going on, because there's so many people that don't know about that. Um, so and I think that changes, it's much more stressful for the staff than it was perhaps in the past, right? They're just up against backlash that, you know, about a vaccine that they've been maybe being involved with for decades and decades and only ever been thanked for doing it, and now being attacked for doing that work. So I think that's very stressful for them and difficult, and the civility sometimes is not there.
Yeah. Before we go to Roger's question, just real briefly, how big is the staff? Like, how big is the health department versus the board? You know,
Well, the board's only 3 people,
okay, yeah.
which is a tough board, right? Because you can't have a conversation with 2 people on the board without that being a quorum. So it's really hard to talk to each other, which, you know, and it's certainly hard to get people to want to run for these positions too. And right. And so you said, oh, well, maybe this should be a 5-person board. Well, that has its challenges too, right? But so the department, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, and annual report's probably the best way to look at that. But let's say there's about 10 people.
Okay,
in the health department. Yeah.
cool. Roger.
Yeah, I'd like to come back to this question about assessing risk. I do appreciate the challenges around that. And I'm curious about how you and the board think about risk. Clearly, you're balancing that against benefits, but at what level and with what kind of evidence do you start to feel like you may need to speak up and say to the town, even though there may not be a regulation yet, that you're suspicious, you're concerned, you think that there could be a risk to public health? Um, if it's 1 in a billion, you probably wouldn't speak up. If it's one in 10,000 or 1 in 100,000, I know it's hard to put a number on that, but I'm curious how you and the board just kind of think about that risk to public health in general.
Right. Well, I think you rely on a lot of good sources, right? Whether it's been traditionally a CDC or a pediatric society or the BU School of Public Health, or the State Department of Public Health. I mean, those are all great sources to get real information. And there's how many cities and towns in Massachusetts, right? And so a lot of times when we're having our discussions too, I encourage them to go talk to your peers from all these other communities and work collectively on these problems. You don't have to, right? New Englanders, like every town, we're doing this all by ourselves. But
Yeah.
talk to the other towns around you because you're really all in this together.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So I'm curious. I don't. Or there was a federal regulation about PFAS in the water supply. What was there discussion among towns or in Natick about putting kind of your own setting your own levels for that, or was it just a question of waiting for the federal government or the state to come down with a regulation?
right. And those well, now we're looking back. I think that the public awareness of the problem was gradual and right, I think the first regulation was to go to 70 parts per trillion was the drinking water standard, right? And now the federal one is 4, I think, right? Parts
Yeah.
per trillion. Um,
The feds
I
and the
remember
feds
the
and the state have been leapfrogging each other over the years.
right. And do you put a carbon filter on your refrigerator anyway or on your sink anyway? So you're talking about just the water that you drink versus the water that is on you in the shower. I think there's been, as you just said, there's kind of been a flip-flopping, right? And if you look internationally too at the standards that are in other parts of the world, they vary widely. Which I think then points back to that toxicology issue of how different places are interpreting that risk.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. So, I mean, that makes sense to me that risk assessment can be extremely challenging, and Natick may not want to step up as the first town to make a decision when it's really difficult to do, and you might be waiting for others to kind of set the standard that you guys have to take up and respond to. But
Yeah.
appreciate the difficulty of the decisions you have to make.
Well, yeah, and on the water side too, it's going to be really interesting, right? Because Natick's water comes from wells, right? There's a number of wells all around town. Some of them are wells that are under the influence of surface water, right? So they're there, and those are the wells that are more often impacted by some of these kinds of chemicals, right?
Yeah.
And there's a consideration of whether down the road Natick would use some or all of its water from the MWRA system, which
Yeah.
comes from the Quabbin Reservoir, which is surface water, but a more pristine surface water. So, and the risks and costs associated with those choices, and giving up being like, this is our own water, but your own water is connected to the Charles River that's not so clean, and or Lake Cochituate that
Yeah.
has a lot of legacy pollution.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool. As usual, Brindley has been populating the chat with lots of relevant links to the topics being discussed. So thanks for that, Brindley. Well, Carla, thanks so much for all of this information, both a little thumbnail of how you've come to this position, but also the challenges that the board and the department face. You've got your hands full, certainly. I see Cindy's got her hand up, but then after that, I'd like to shift the focus over to the assessor's office with Eric. So, Cindy?
Yeah, I think two pretty quick questions. One is you talked about the schools, and I'm just curious how like how does the board, you were talking about that when during COVID there was interaction between your board, the Board of Health, and the school committee. And is there anything besides when you have an epidemic where there's a normal relationship, and what that is? And my second question is, I have decided not to go to Whole Foods to get my peanut butter anymore because they have to be in plastic containers. And so I'm now going to schlepping all the way to Newton where I can get my own containers. And I'm working on the guy at Silesia to see if he would put in a peanut butter machine. And he's really too busy. But would he, is the Board of Health the place where that would be the only place where he would need to go to to demonstrate that, well, I don't know. I'm just curious. And you may not know that because maybe
And I don't. I would refer that to the staff.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
All right. So number one, then, just my first question.
What was number one?
About the school committee.
Right.
Yeah.
Not enough cross communication, right? Except when something goes wrong. And isn't that like the story that we all tell? So, right. And I think we're far enough in the rearview mirror. Say, I think there was a lot of concern of who was going to be the bad guy during COVID, and maybe it was helpful to have the health department be the bad guy sometimes too, about what decisions to make. And we all were trying to make good decisions with the information that was available. And in hindsight, we would have made the same decisions, maybe not across the board, right? Right. We were all outside with masks on, right? When you probably didn't need to do that, right? If you're the only one walking your dog, right? So I wish there were.
I guess what areas?
There's room for more communication, cross communication. I mean, this field thing is there's cross communication. There's involvement with the schools on these various initiatives. There's not a regular that I am aware of cross between school committee members and Board of Health members. I know some of the school committee members, so that's helpful.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Catherine, you had your hand up, and then we'll transition to Eric.
Just one quick answer to a previous question. So the health department is the only place George would need to go, George from Coliquia, for the peanut butter bar. He has run into some resistance with town boards and committees about what he needs to do, but I'm glad you mentioned that, and I will talk to George and tell him it'd be great to have a peanut butter bar, and all he has to do is go to the Board of Health. Doesn't have to come to the town, doesn't need a permit from select board, doesn't need anything else, just one-stop shopping. And thank you for bringing that up. I will talk to him.
That's great news, Catherine. Thanks for that. Cool. Well, Carla, again, thanks. You're welcome to stay on. As you said, you had a 9-to-5 job, so we'll understand if you drop off. But you're welcome back anytime. And you'll have the link to our YouTube channel to watch our sessions. It was really nice to meet you.
Yeah, it was nice to meet you all too, and I really appreciate you reaching out. And everybody, remember to vote tomorrow.
We will.
Thank you so much.
Crowd. Yeah. Eric, welcome again. Tell us about the assessor's office, the difference between employees and appointed, elected positions, and everything we want to know.
All
Just
right.
guess, yeah.
Well, first off, thank you very much for the invite, and I officially support the peanut butter bar. So just as a quick introduction, my name is Eric Henderson. I'm the Director of Assessing. I've been with the town of Natick for about 10 years, but I was your consultant for the 10 years prior to that. So I worked for a company that would go to different assessing offices. I made it from northern Maine to Indiana in my travels, just doing your values. And then by the time the tax bills hit your mailboxes, I was long gone. These days, I am here in January and really love the community. It's a great spot. I live over in Sudbury with my wife Heidi and my 10-year-old Thomas. So this morning, I just want to talk a little bit about what assessors do in the grand scheme of things, how we interact with our elected board of assessors. There is an election tomorrow. So let's just start like assessors, what do we do? So most of what we do is driven by Mass General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 5. And again, Prop 2.5. So Prop 2.5 really drives how we assess in Massachusetts. I've done assessing work in 13 different states. The appraisal is the same everywhere, but the rest of it, how we set a budget, how we calculate new growth, that type of things is a little bit Massachusetts specific. So our main charge is property valuation and classification. So we work with the Department of Revenue, Division of Local Services. We need to value property at fair market value, AKA what it would sell for in a market. And then we classify that property. The property is personal property, commercial property, residential property. Coming up with that tax base is kind of an important step towards setting a tax rate, and kind of it's our financial backbone. The vast majority of the town's revenues come from property taxes. We do abatements and exemptions. So I had a good conversation about this the other day. Abatement and exemptions are semi the same, but they're different. So an abatement goes to a property, and that would be you get your tax bill and I'm assessing your house at X and you think it's worth less than that. What you would do is you would come in and file an appeal. We would come look at the house and say, okay, your kitchen is still avocado green 1965. Maybe we are a little bit too high. That would be an abatement. What I'm going to talk about a little bit longer on after is what we call an exemption. So an abatement goes with the property, an exemption goes with the person. So we run a pretty robust exemption program, which my assistant director of assessing, Ann Hansberry, really runs, and many folks know her. She's been here for a long time, really working with people on these programs. But so when we're talking about exemptions, we're talking about blind individuals, disabled veterans, and low income and asset senior citizens. Let's go over to the board a little bit. So the Board of Assessors in Natick here is an elected position. And basically, the board is an advisory and policy-driven board. Under the laws, the board is actually the one that values your property. Now, in reality, again, it's an advisory board with a professional staff, but it is the Board of Assessors that are signing off and certifying that our values are fair and equitable each year, and that's the first step in the process for us to set a tax rate. The board, again, is a really good assistance. Generally, our board members have had real estate appraisal, real estate financing type backgrounds, and we utilize the board for a lot of this information. And really, on a policy process, we've had a very active board, especially the last couple of years. So a couple of things that we've done at Springtown Meeting 2023. We did a number of articles that were kind of set it and forget it articles. So what I mean by that is we took votes that then kept the programs running moving forward. So the first thing we did, many old school town meeting remember the assessors, we would go in front of you every year and bump our exemption amounts 2.5% every year. Well, unfortunately, our tax bills were going up faster than 2.5%. So what we decided to do a couple of years ago was just double the amounts from the state level. So the state has a level here. Without a home rule petition under our current laws, we can double those amounts. So we've done that. One of the other things is we've added a COLA, a cost of living adjustment, to the income and asset qualifiers for our low income and asset senior programs. Most communities have not done this, so the asset and income levels are very low and were really set many, many years ago when Prop 2.5 was passed. So now we've added it. So there's an annual COLA set by the state that's added to these so that we can deal with the inflation. Inflation has been such an issue here the last couple of years. It was an issue that the board saw, we as a staff saw, and wanted to jump on it. The other thing that I want to talk about is one of the things we've been proactive about is the tax deferral program. So the tax deferral program, as a qualifying senior citizen, is a good program for a number of reasons. First off, as a moderate income senior citizen, your real estate tax bill is most of the time your biggest annual bill. The deferral program allows you to not pay that bill. The taxes get deferred. So the bill does get paid eventually when the property sells. So a couple of the things we've done here is we've lowered the interest rate. So statutorily in most of the state, the interest rate is 8%, which especially 4 or 5 years ago when interest rates were 2%, that was not a very good deal. It's not as bad of a deal now, but we've lowered that to 2%. The other thing we've done is a real significant increase to the income levels. So in the majority, we have 351 cities and towns in this state. My assumption is that about 330 of them, to qualify for the deferral program, you have to make less than $20,000 a year. Not a lot of people are in that boat. We've raised that amount again at town meeting, through the Board of Assessors, to the highest amount that the state will allow under our current laws. So that amount again changes every year and is indexed to the circuit breaker program. So that for this year was $72,000. Next year it's going up to $75,000. So it's something to keep in mind. It's not a program for everyone. But it's one of those things that we see. We see some seniors who have done a reverse mortgage, which I will come right out and say are awful, awful ideas. And Tom Selleck does commercials for it. So Tom Selleck is now on the hit list. But also, you see a lot of people that do a home equity or a refinance later in life when it probably isn't the best financial decision. But when your boiler breaks or you need a new roof, you don't have a choice, right? This deferral program is a good situation if you want to age in place. Then you have a little bit money set aside. So when you need a new roof or when you need a new boiler, you can go ahead and do that and have some funding on hand without having to do that. So that's my quick intro. I'm here to answer any questions you all have for the assessors and on exemptions or property valuations or whatnot. So let it rip, my friends.
Thank you, Eric. And I see that Catherine's got her hand up. Catherine.
So a couple of things I wanted to share. Eric has been astonishingly helpful with residents. So I've personally shuffled or shuttled a number of people over to his office for this program. This weekend, I got a call on a Saturday from a senior who I don't know, who another resident referred to me about what this program was and what it does and what it doesn't do. So two things I wanted to let people know and also to ask Eric to comment on. I have the first thing is I've drafted about 6 questions that we can teach other seniors as a cohort, as kind of a class. If you have colleagues that you know, the best way to get the word of this program out is to have other seniors know about it, even if they don't need it, so that when they're talking to their friends, they can talk to them and say, hey, I understand you're having a problem with your taxes. Here's 5 questions I want to ask you. You don't need to know anything about somebody's financial background or what their needs are, their assets. You don't need to know what their income is. So these 5 questions you ask, and then you say, you qualify for tax deferral almost in perpetuity, because the value of the taxes you can defer is up to half the value of assessed value of your home. So if your home's assessed at $900,000, I think the median now is 800 and change. Let's say it's 850. So for $425,000, you can defer all of those taxes. And if you're okay with that, and it isn't for everyone, like Eric said, but for people for whom it is a lifeline, who don't necessarily have heirs, their heirs aren't interested in the house, who need this, it has been life-changing. A couple who live in my neighborhood, I'm really close to, they spend $10,000 a year in their retirement instead of taxes on traveling. And their kids are so happy that they have this extra money to do that. And we, the taxpayers, the rest of us, we fund that at 2% simple interest. And I'm really happy to do that. So that's the first thing. Second thing is promptly forgot, turn it over to you guys. Sorry about that. Oh, wait, Doug, I remembered.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that I've drafted and I want to bring before the select board this spring is a potential special act to go to the legislature, bring it to town meeting, I hope in fall, maybe the following spring, depending on a couple of things, is a proposal for, first of all, the select board to debate, because it's a debatable issue. There are issues, there are, trade-offs, but to talk about whether or not we want to offer our seniors in a needs-based assessment, an exemption from a potential debt exclusion for new schools. So that's something I want to throw out to this group to think about. I'm happy. There are arguments for and against it, but one of the arguments for it is that, home appreciations have gone up over, I think, Eric, correct me if this is wrong, but hasn't it been the last couple of years, 7%, 7%? Now we're looking at like 4%. And so there are a lot of seniors who meet the circuit breaker, which is now, I think, $107,000 for a couple, a joint filing taxpayers. They don't really have that income coming in. So maybe we support our schools, but we allow seniors who've been here 10 years, who meet, there are certain parameters to opt out of that. Again, it's a debatable topic. There are pros and cons, but I'd like to see a robust discussion and maybe bring it to town meeting.
Thanks for all of that, Catherine. And obviously, we're going to let Eric respond to all of it, but I also wanted to follow up and understand specifically what you were proposing to do with the set of questions, or how that you've drafted, or how those
sorry
can
about
get
that.
shared. Yeah.
Yes, sorry about that. Is having a class down at the Community Senior Center that is led by Eric or Ann, somebody in the office, that kind of informs other seniors about ways to get the word out about this tax deferral program. So it's just having the information so that when you're in your peer groups, or anybody, I'm 60, so people who are in peer groups of people who are 65 and older, somebody not complaining, but saying, look, these taxes are really hitting me. Now they're hitting 12,000 a year, whatever. Somebody can say, the question had been posed to me, how do we get this out? I don't want to ask my neighbors about their financial situation. So being able to say, look, I don't know anything, I don't need to know anything about that, but do you meet the income requirements under the circuit breaker? I don't know. Well, that's 109,000 for a joint couple, or whatever it is now for, I think it's 78,000.
75.
75. Okay. And so going through these 5 questions, do you have a mortgage? So if you have a mortgage, the bank has to sign off on it. No, we don't care about your assets. So if you have a 401k or a retirement plan or whatever, we don't care about that. Making sure that the seniors know that they qualify for this program. Just to get the word out so that there's a peer group. I mean, I don't necessarily have a lot of friends people reach out to me because I'm on the select board, not because I'm necessarily down at the Community Senior Center or in different, I'm at Sons of Italy, I might be at AMVETS. But all of us know people who are over 65 who are struggling with their taxes. And if all of us had that information at our fingertips, we could be more, and part of me says, oh, don't tell too many people. It's a tiny part of me, because that means we're going to be carrying more of the tax burden. But I'd gladly do that for those people who can't carry that burden. So.
Cool. All right. Thanks for clarifying. So Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Thank you, Catherine. Catherine, huge supporter, and yes, she sends people in our direction. So our biggest goal, we've updated and revamped our website, and I know a lot of people are not web users out there. Our main goal, again, is just to create that open line of contact. If it's your neighbor who seems to be struggling, they can call us, they can email us, they can go to the web. One thing I want to make everyone very, very clear about, this is all confidential information. Okay. We do ask people for tax returns, bank statements, checking accounts. It's a little bit of work, but it is all confidential information. When these issues are discussed in Board of Assessor meetings, this is all executive session. So I want to make sure, because again, I get that. If you were to come to our window, folks don't like talking finances out in a big lobby, right? I get it. We're going to pull you into the back. We'll sit down at our conference table. We'll have the conversation. We're not going to push anything on you. We just want to let you know your options. On our website, one of my favorite things we have is an article from the Boston Globe from probably 10 years ago. And I don't know exactly what it's called, but it's something like the best program or the best deal you've never heard of, right? And what this article was based on was the deferral program, which mostly focused on Wellesley and Newton. So 10, 15 years ago, Wellesley and Newton are both two high-end, high-valued real estate residential property values, right? You can be house rich and cash poor, though. And the Newton and those assessors saw the need there, and they were proactive about going to their city council or town meeting to adjust the interest rates and the income levels to actually make it a program that works. Oregon is the other state in the country that has a pretty good program, and they have a much better participation rate in this program than we do. And again, part of that is because most of the state hasn't really amended the laws from the original basics. So again, we're just trying to drive that conversation. If we can help a couple of people, we're happy. So that's our goal. So I will move it on. For any
Thanks
other
for
question.
that. Bill, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. That's very interesting and helpful discussion around abatement and the for seniors. My question has to do with exemptions and what if someone's circumstances change. Is there a way for folks to approach you for a reduction in the taxes? I guess it would call an exemption.
Correct.
Can you
Yep.
talk a little bit about that? Thank you.
Yep. So the way the exemptions work, depending on your situation, again, they mostly revolve around disabled veterans, blind individuals, low income and asset seniors. So as soon as the fiscal year starts in July 1st, we can accept your application and it goes through April 1st. So there's a good window. For a low income asset senior exemption, again, we're looking at things like your checking accounts, your tax returns. Let's talk the deferral program real quick. The deferral program is the one that a larger percentage of seniors will qualify for. So Catherine mentioned the bank. So what happens in a deferral agreement? And I'm going to say a word that's going to scare people, lien, right? We don't like that word. It makes us all nervous. It is not a bad thing. What happens is if Bill, if you were to enter the deferral program, what we would do is record a lien at the Registry of Deeds. All that lien is, and that's when a lot of people start getting nervous and running for the door. All a lien is so that when the property sells, the lawyers will do deed research and title research at the Registry of Deeds, and they will just see this document recorded by the Town of Natick Board of Assessors that says, okay, hold on real quick, the Town of Natick has an interest in this property and is owed some money. Catherine mentioned if you have a mortgage, and this includes even like a home equity or a refinance. The trick to this program, if you have a mortgage, is your bank needs to sign off on the agreement. Your bank needs to subrogate themselves. That is a word that bankers don't like to hear. It basically it means that Town of Natick is the number one lien holder. We get paid first, and the bank is the number two lien holder. They get paid second. They don't really like doing this. They've gotten much better in the last decade, where even some of the national banks. So if you were to come in and say, I'm interested in this program, if you had a mortgage, I can't necessarily communicate to the bank on your behalf, but I write you a nice form letter. We give the bank some business cards, and we open up that door where if the bank has questions, they can talk to us. And again, especially if you have a small home equity line on a $700,000 house, the bank's generally not going to have an issue signing off on this. This is a good program, again, I think, especially here, because we have so much equity in our homes. The property values have skyrocketed so much in the last decade, but that equity is not helping you pay your monthly bills, right? Um, so that's that on the deferral program.
So abatement,
I,
exemption.
yeah,
Oh, go ahead,
yeah,
Bill.
exemption. I just was, can you focus on exemptions? How does that work? If someone is low income?
Okay. Well, I'll read you a couple numbers, and then these numbers change every year. And that's
Okay.
why it's easy just to go to our website. So we have, again,
Understood.
if you're a disabled veteran, you just need to bring your paperwork from the VA. Blind individual, you bring your blind certificate from the Commission of Blindness. So essentially, if you're over 65, you're single, your maximum income has to be under about $22,000, and your assets have to be less than $45,000. So assets are basically everything you have, not including your house, stocks, bonds, IRAs. If you qualify for that, so let's just go with the married numbers. The married, your income has to be less than about $34,000. Your assets have to be less than about $62,000. That is, if you were to qualify for this, it's a $2,000 credit towards your taxes. So most of the state is still at $1,000. We've doubled it to $2,000. The other nice benefit of this is we work with the water sewer department, where you get a reduced water sewer rates. And the other thing is we work with the senior center, where you actually get quarterly sleeves of trash bags as part of this program too. The other that what we call that is our clause 41C exemption, which again is the area in the law that it was written. The other program we have is clause 17D, which doesn't look at your income, it just looks at your assets. Your assets have to be less than about $45,000. And again, that's a $350 credit towards your taxes each year. Again, with the water sewer discount, with the quarterly sleeves of trash bags. So it's not a lot, but it's something. And again, that 350 is a doubling of the state amount of $175. So what we would do, we would have you come in sooner rather than later. And what we do on our side is verify a few things. Do you own and occupy the house? Those are musts, right? You have to own, you have to occupy the house. And then again, we're looking at tax returns and bank statements and things of that nature to make sure you qualify for the program.
Thank you.
And now when we talk about abatements, there's one thing I did want to say about an abatement. So abatement goes with the property, right? You get your tax bill, I'm assessing you at 850 and you think it's only worth 650. The month of January is really the only window for what we call a formal abatement. You file an abatement application to us. I always like to tell people, we might not be able to change your value 12 months a year. We have periods of a frozen value and a frozen file for tax billing. But if you have any concerns about your property value or how we're assessing it, we're a pretty open door policy. We can pop out to your house tomorrow and just take a look and make sure our data is correct and we feel like we're treating you accurately, fairly. And most, the biggest key is that you're being valued like, if not your neighbor, but if your neighbor's a similar house, you're going to be valued in a similar process. Thank you.
Well, let me try a super gross simplification and tell me how wrong I am. So abatements, exemptions, deferrals. Abatements are if you believe the town has incorrect information, what you were just talking about, a more accurate assessment. Exemptions are need-based, either assets or income. And deferrals pretty much just are this great way for a homeowner, regardless of need per se. I mean, it's self-determined. I would prefer, to defer the taxes, and that just is that basically the difference? And it doesn't sound like there's major approval things for the deferral piece.
Yeah. Well, this meeting this morning started because we got an election tomorrow. We wanted to talk assessing and board. So again, this is one of those things that the Board of Assessors votes on. But to a certain extent, again, there's not a lot of debate on some of these things because it's set by law. So you qualify, you don't. So this is kind of the easy votes for the Board of Assessors. Some of the more difficult votes in the Board of Assessors are, say, we have a court case on a big commercial property and we're looking at our potential court costs and our settlement cost and how we feel on our value versus the other value, the opponents of value. That's the more exciting stuff of BOA, but a lot of BOA is basically, yes, you qualify for this, and then again, as an operations standpoint, we're kind of running the operations.
Okay.
And the deferral basically is considered an exemption. It's in that same area within the law. And you can get both. So, and we do. We have folks that get both. So you can qualify for that 41C. You get $2,000 off your tax bill, and then you can also do the deferral and defer that smaller amount.
Okay. Great. Cindy.
Yeah. It's like a major turn of subject. Could you talk about the map, the GIS, and how that works? And clearly, in the last 20 years, a huge change for towns across everywhere, moving from the paper blueprints, I guess, to an online system. Just if you could just talk a little bit about that and how that's maintained.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I wasn't prepared for that one, but that's okay. It's funny because I always drove around for years and years and years with a bunch of tax maps from a bunch of different communities in the back of my truck that I don't have back there anymore. No, GIS is one of the best products that we've seen. So the way our GIS works is essentially our GIS file gets frozen, and then throughout the year, we update ownership information. And then about this time of year, in preparation for our July 1st tax rolls, we are putting on our legal lawyer hats in this office, and we're looking at all the recorded plans and the new condo conversions and things like that. And we work both with our GIS coordinator, Rich Ames, and we also work with the MapGeo vendor to do our lot splits and cuts and things of that nature. GIS is not perfect by any means. I know at my house in Sudbury, it looks like my garage is on my neighbor's land. And the way Rich explains it is he's really trying to fit a shape that's like this into a shape that's like this, and it shoves it, and it's not perfect, but it is a really, really good tool for us. And we're consistently in assessing it's funny. Once you get outside of New England, everything's a nice square rectangle, everything meets zoning, life is easy. We are in New England, right? Nothing's straight, nothing's easy. We still make lot changes because there's a neighbor dispute and someone hired a licensed surveyor, and we're making adjustments still on lots that were carved out 200 years ago. So yes, that's kind of how we interact with the GIS, and we really are the base data behind the GIS data.
Thank you.
Thanks for that information. So you were saying you guys do the appraisals and assess the values, and then that becomes the input information for establishing the tax rate. Natick has, correct me if I get me wrong, we've got a unified tax rate, single tax rate, but certainly there are voices that say, no, we should have a split tax rate. Is that kind of question or discussion something that's completely outside the purview of assessors? Does that go with the budgeting or overall town finances? Or do you have an opinion about it that you feel safe expressing?
So that is definitely a good question, and yes, has been a hot button topic for many, 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 many years. I think this is an issue that, again, there are definitely two sides. There, there's pluses and minuses, like any decision we make. We talked earlier, Board of Health, like, hey, do you do this? Do you? Um, there is pluses and minuses, and there is potential ramifications that I don't think you could predict, but you just would kind of have to be prepared for them. This is where, as the operations side of things, I would not take a policy decision on this. This is an issue where the Board of Assessors, in theory, could take a pro or con side of it. But to a certain extent, and historically here, the Board of Assessors has not made, for frame of reference, we do a classification hearing every fall, every year before we set that tax rate. Anyone who's really excited about assessing, I don't know if there's that many of you out there, can go to the website. We put every single classification hearing up there. And it's a nice little document that kind of shows what happened to our values this year, what are we looking at, what's our average value doing, and how it works with the whole tax rate process. At that classification, every single year, the select board votes to maintain a single rate or to split that rate. So this is something where our Board of Assessors hasn't necessarily taken a pro or con or made a recommendation to the select board here. Part of that is, again, we talked about what the assessors do, the Board of Assessors do. Our goal, again, is fair and equitable valuation, right? We value and classify property, and we're a little bit separate from the tax policy side. But, we're always more than happy to provide data, try to provide some of the pros and cons, both from an operations standpoint and the Board of Assessors also.
Mm-hmm. Great. Cool.
And I will say, on a side note, I know there's an election tomorrow, and Wendy Curran-Alassi is running as an incumbent. She's been on our board for the last 3 years, so I won't take a political take here and there, and even in a non-contested race. But Wendy is the assessor in Westborough, Massachusetts, and has also worked in Sherborne assessing and Framingham assessing. So she is an assessor. She is a certified Massachusetts assessor, and I think in general the town of Natick and the staff is lucky to have her.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, both for that and what Carla was telling us earlier about her professional experience. I think we're so blessed, that's the wrong word, but in Natick to have folks in these elected positions that this is their bread and butter. They live this job, even though they're not getting paid for it. So, yeah. Donna, I see you've got your hand up.
I have what I think is a quick question. Is it the case that the base price for the assessment on a house is lower the fewer times it's been sold? For example, a 70-year-old house that's never been sold compared to a house that's been sold every 10 or 15 years. Is the assessment higher on that one that's been sold more frequently?
It really has no relevance. Because what happens is we value the current market. So if something sold 5 years ago, that sale is now kind of too old to be relevant. And the only other thing is that there may have been changes to that property. Now, the only other thing you will see with a house that hasn't sold in 70 years, maybe it's a little outdated. Maybe but if there was a house that had the same owner forever, but they've done kitchen renos and remodeling, 5 years ago, they're going to be assessed similar to other houses that are similar in size and a similar location and a similar condition. Again, condition, and when I say condition, I'm not talking about roof or painting. If you put on a new roof, we're not going to come out and reassess you. If you're adding a major addition or doing a major $125,000 kitchen remodel, yes, we are going to come out and reassess you. So I hope that answered the question.
So, I mean, I guess I have a follow-up question on that.
That helps. I just have to say, my mother never wanted to do anything that would trigger an assessor's visit. As much as my parents thought about adding on a garage and an addition to the house. So there is a fear among people about, assessments, but I just thought it would be an interesting question. Thank you so much.
Well,
Yeah,
it's a good question, and let me chime in real quick because I do believe the old school mentality was an assessor. You're out there chasing money, and maybe in other states it's a little bit more true. Here we have Prop 2.5, though. So, and though this is the way I like to say it, Prop 2.5, the budget's set and the tax rate adjusts. So let's just say next year our budget didn't change at all. So when that's never going to happen, but let's just say it. And let's say we had a horrible market collapse and I had to lower everyone's values 50%. What's your tax bill the next year? Same exact as it is this year. The only difference instead of a $12.17 tax rate is we then have a $24.34 tax rate. The tax rate doubles. So I always find this funny, like Connecticut, for example. I did a lot of work in Connecticut. We would value the properties at 100% what they're worth. And then on the tax bill, there was an assessment level of 70%. So it'd be $1 million house, your tax bill would say $700,000. Why? It was a perception, right? It was an absolute. So the taxpayer goes, "Oh, they only got me assessed at 700,000," when really the tax rate just gets increased. So it's kind of just a shell game. But again, taxes are relatively budget driven in the long run.
Thank you. That's helpful.
My follow-on question to that was simply going to be, is there a automatic tie-in between the building department and the assessor's office so that when major renovations are done on an existing house that require building permits, does that trigger any kind of a updated review of that property?
100%. And that's what our staff has been really busy doing. I'd like to say this busy stretch has lasted 5 years, but it's probably been 10. But yes, and actually the building department updated their software 5, 6 years ago, which has been a huge help. We really work hand in hand with the building department. But yes, we live in their software system. We're in there it's one of the first, we log into it every morning for breakfast, along with our real estate, our personal property, our tax billing software. So yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Eric, for spending some time with us, and particularly elaborating on the various programs to help homeowners reduce their taxes. Thank you, Catherine, for reaching out to Eric and asking him to be with us. Thanks to Brinley again for lining up all of the candidates over this election season. Definitely, folks, go out and vote tomorrow. It always matters. I see Donna's got her hand up. After that, we'll move to just current events and then close out for the day. Donna?
I have another quick question. I hope you said that there were 3 categories of property and one was personal. What's the difference between personal and residential? I mean, are there things that are taxable that I'm not aware of?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have a few more than that. So we have on real estate, we have residential, commercial, and industrial, and then we have personal property. So personal property, your personal property in your residence, where you occupy, where you sleep at night, is exempt from taxation. The things like your vehicle is not exempt from taxation, but it is taxed via another mechanism, your motor vehicle excise bill. So we don't tax that. So personal property is really a business personal property tax. What we tax is based on how the business is set up. So like a corporation, we only tax their machinery because they pay corporate taxes on the rest of their stuff, assets, furniture, fixture, etc. If a business is an LLC or a sole proprietor, we basically tax your stapler, your desk, your chairs, your computer, etc. Really, our personal property, the main drivers of our personal property are really NSTAR and that, like gas pipelines, telephone wires, things of that nature.
Thank you.
That's very interesting. I know some towns, I think it's Truro, has started taxing the furnishings on people's property.
So you can tax second homes, and Cape Cod does that a lot because you have a lot of seasonal properties. We do not here. We hadn't really the issue with a tax like that is equity. We've never felt it was worth it to find all of, I know we probably do have a few rentals and second homes, but there's not a lot of them.
Hmm. Interesting.
Thank you very much.
And again, that's taxing your couch and your bed and your that type of stuff in a second home.
Wow. All right. Again, well, thanks to both of you for joining us. And Brinley, perhaps you can tell us what's going on. Actually, before you do that, just to let folks know. So next week, we're going to have an updated visit from our sustainability director, Jillian Wilson Martin, who's always got a lot to tell us. I think she maybe even has a new employee working with her now that she wants to introduce to us. And then after that, we'll move to spring town meeting preparation with a moderator and FinCom chair. But Brinley, what's going on this week?
All right.
Well,
Thank you guys.
Thank you, Eric.
thank you
Thank
so much,
you.
Eric.
I gotta get to work.
Yeah.
Thanks,
you.
guys.
I can say that we're voting this week.
Yes, we are.
Tomorrow, polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. I can give you a quick list if you're curious. If you're precinct 1, 2, or 3, you vote at Kennedy. If you're precinct 4, you vote at the Morse Library. Precinct 5 and 6 vote at Wilson Middle School. And precincts 7, 8, 9, and 10 vote at the community center. There's no change from last year for that. That is how we voted last year as well. The reorganization meetings for the select board and the school committee will be on Wednesday and Thursday, respectively. So select board on Wednesday and school committee on Thursday. These are little short meetings that all they do is welcome the new people, swear them in, and say who's going to be the chair and the vice chair and the secretary or the clerk, et cetera, for the next year. They don't really do any other business than that, but they are cool. If you've never been to one, they are cool to see and experience democracy in action and changing of the guard. Monday night is a memorial school building committee meeting. They don't have those very often, and tomorrow night for that should be pretty interesting because they're going to be talking about the OPM, which is the owner's property management, and where we are on that process, which is kind of like when you do a house, you have a general contractor. For the OPM, it is the business that the company that does all of the big picture for the school committee and the administration. They help to hire the architect. They watch the process through the whole thing to make sure everything is running smoothly as is. So it's kind of like our general contractor would be for a house. I think that's basically it for this week. So I hope everybody goes to the polls tomorrow and votes. And if anybody, if you have a particular candidate that you like and you want to hold a sign for, all the candidates go put signs out at all of the polling locations, and you can just show up at a polling location and pick up a sign for that person and hold it for a little while. They'd all greatly appreciate it.
That's good advice. Thanks again, Brinley, for everything. All right. Well, enjoy the day and the week, and we will see you all next week. Bye-bye.
I just would like to say before we leave, I just would like to say thank you to Catherine Coughlin, if she's still on here, because I'm grateful that she hooked us up with Eric, because I was complaining a little bit about not being able to get anybody, and she stepped right in and took care of that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah. And as she's saying in the chat, Eric is awesome. Yeah. You've got good people working for the town, both paid and volunteering. All right. I'm going to turn the recording off and enjoy the week, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.